Hello, I'm Scott Stripling, Director of the Archaeological Institute at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas, and Director of Excavations for the Associates for Biblical Research at Ancient Shiloh. My topic today is wet-sifting, a methodological revolution. The process of wet-sifting is an emerging development in archaeological methodology. Although some archaeologists have used it with great success over the past 15 years, it does not yet qualify as a standard archaeological practice. Perhaps the reticence of archaeologists to implement the practice of wet sifting lies in the fact that water is scarce on many archaeological sites, or that wet sifters can be expensive to build and labor-intensive to operate. Alternatively, some archaeologists may not yet be familiar with the technique or simply be closed-minded to the new methodology. I would like to acknowledge several people. First of all, Abigail Levitt was the co-director for my project this last winter, which I'll be discussing with you today. She also contributed to the research for this presentation. Frankie Snyder is a key member of my excavation team and also one of the pioneers in wet sifting. Stephen Rudd constructed a state-of-the-art wet sifting station for my team at Ancient Shiloh. Greg Gulbranson is the supervisor of our wet sifting operations, and of course the Associates for Biblical Research, who sponsors our work in the land of the Bible. A number of technological advancements occur rapidly in the world of archaeology. W.F. Albright stated in 1933 that the rate of development of an archaeological method was so rapid that every properly directed excavation was more advanced than the previous one. We can certainly understand how that was happening in those early days in the 1930s when you had excavations like the Danish work at Shiloh and Shechem and other places that were taking place. The revolution continues to this day, but perhaps not at that accelerated rate. A number of methodological factors come into play when we're talking about the development of wet sifting. First of all, we want to look at the four pertinent aspects of methodological development of a wet sifting operation. The first is as a byproduct of flotation, or what I would term unintentional wet sifting. The purpose of flotation is to retrieve organic material, and it is usually only performed in select loci. A team member mixes archaeological material with water, allowing the organic material to float. He or she can then skim off the floating organic material. Some flotation guides suggest sorting through the heavy fraction as well to retrieve artifacts. Although this is not identical to the concept of wet sifting, it demonstrates an understanding that artifacts can come to light through washing archaeological material. The second factor is the removal of clay. Wet sifting has developed and has found a means to overcome adverse soil conditions. For example, heavy clay which stuck to and obscured objects in pottery posed a major problem for site ORA 507 in California. The archaeologist working at the site developed a system of washing the material in a solution of water and sodium bicarbonate to dissolve the clay and reveal the artifacts. The third factor is processing of unstratified remains. Since 2004, wet sifting has been used to process unstratified, that is, out of context, archaeological remains. The fourth and final factor is the processing of stratified remains. Since 2017, my team at Shiloh has used wet sifting as an integral part of our in-field excavation methodology. Since 2018, 100% of excavated material has been wet sifted at Shiloh. There have been a number of wet sifting milestones. The first occurred in 1999. The Waqf authority that controls and operates the Temple Mount in Jerusalem destroyed the southeast corner of the Temple Mount in an attempt to create new ingress and egress to an underground area known incorrectly as Solomon's Stables. In the process, many tons of archaeological material were removed. In 2004, Dr. Gabby Barkai and one of his graduate students, Zaki Swig, now Zaki Devira, experimented with wet sifting the Temple Mount matrix from the Waqf's destruction activity. In 2008 and 2009, I worked as a supervisor on the Temple Mount sifting project, and it was there that I became committed to wet sifting archaeological material with the hopes of one day being able to do so in a controlled in-field operation. In 2017, the Associates for Biblical Research launches in-field wet sifting of stratified archaeological remains at ancient Shiloh. You're looking here at a slightly fuzzy slide of the destruction of the southeast corner of the Temple Mount in 1999. You'll see here that you have a dump truck and a heavy tractor in here removing soil. Archaeologists would have loved the opportunity to have excavated the southeast corner of the Temple Mount, but by the Waqf taking these illegal actions, they destroyed the stratigraphy of the finds. Only using typology have these finds then been able to have some voice in helping us better understand the Temple Mount complex. You can see me here in 2009 working at the Temple Mount sifting project, and I'm holding in my hand a plastic tray, and the system which they developed since there was no stratigraphy to the matrix. The matrix is first dry sifted and then soaked overnight and then dumped into a tray and sprayed with a hose and then checked through by a volunteer, and then a supervisor would check that volunteer's work. You'll see the 6 categories are pottery, glass, special stones, metal, bone, and tessita, also known as mosaic tiles. You can see me here with one of the coins, and this is always exciting when folks find a coin. We try not to make it known because everyone wants to stop working and take a look at the coin or take a picture with the coin. It does, however, illustrate the types of things that are missed in regular dry sifting. And of course, you can see here a much younger picture of me with hair and glasses. You're looking here at our friend and my colleague, Frankie Snyder. And Frankie found a niche at the Temple Mount Sifting Project, identifying and reconstructing, using her background in geometry, what are known as opus sectile tiles, which are described by Josephus as the flooring of the Second Temple. We now know that they also were used at Herodian sites such as Jericho, Herodium, and Masada. Frankie then has used this technology to identify these stones and move from the known to the unknown to reconstruct what the flooring would have looked like in the Second Temple. You can see her here working with our team at Ancient Shiloh as a small finds expert. We have found no opus sectile there. Some of the top finds from the Temple Mount Sifting Project, which of course put wet sifting on the world's radar, are here before us. The first is a golden bell, and this bell comes from the drainage channel which runs from the Pool of Siloam in the city of David up to the Temple Mount. We know from the writings from the biblical period that the priests wore small golden bells on the hem of their garment, and sure enough, this is likely what this was. This was excavated by Reich and Shukron and then subcontracted. The matrix of the soil was, after it had already been checked, to the Temple Mount Salvage Project or Sifting Project. This is another example of what is being thrown away in excavations that are not doing wet sifting. Another interesting find is a Scytho-Iranian arrowhead, likely used by the Babylonians in the destruction of Jerusalem in 587 BC. One of my favorite finds is a fragment of a cuneiform tablet, possibly an archival copy of Elamarna letter 285 to 290, which are written by Abdihiba, the king of Jerusalem. Apparently, there were archival copies that were kept. Eilat Mazar's dig uncovered this. The material was dry sifted. It was not found. She then subcontracted with TMSP, and after being wet sifted, this fragment was found. It's enormously important for our understanding of Jerusalem in the late Bronze Age. Another incredible find, also from the drainage channel in the city of David, which runs from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount, is this small purity token. It reads, "Pure unto the Lord." We know about these from sources like Josephus, and we know about the ritual purity culture that was so dominant in the late Second Temple period, with ossuary burials, mikvot baptism, preference for stone vessels. This gives us just another glimpse at that ritual purity culture. This would be almost impossible to find if it had not been washed. These are the types of finds that are being thrown away by most excavations because of a failure to wet sift. Fortunately, there are some who are now beginning to wet sift. Shimon Gibson is wet sifting at least strategic loci at his Mount Zion excavation, and last season was the first season for them to do this, but they did it on site. Of course, as I've mentioned at Shiloh, we are wet sifting 100% of the material which we excavate in stratified context in the field. Within the city of David, there are various projects that are going on there, and there is selected wet sifting that is being done now at their own sifting station. At the Ophel, which connects the Temple Mount with the city of David, Eilat Mazar, as I mentioned previously, is doing selected wet sifting, subcontracting it. At Azekah, Lipschitz is doing some wet sifting there on the site, and at Lachish, Garfinkel is as well. Last winter, as part of our winter project, which I'll be discussing in a few minutes, Shay Bar from Haifa University came and visited our portable wet sifter, which we had constructed to excavate the material from Mount Ebal. And he was so impressed with what we were finding and what had been thrown away that we were able to construct one for him, which he is now using in his excavations in the Jordan Valley and in the Manasseh region with great success. To my knowledge, these are the only excavations currently using wet sifting. You're looking here at Herschel Shanks with the camera around his neck. Herschel was the founder and influential editor of Biblical Archaeology Review. He has his arm around Eilat Mazar, the granddaughter of the famous Benjamin Mazar, Eilat herself being a renowned archaeologist, and we've mentioned some of her finds, which came about due to wet sifting. And to Herschel Shanks' right is Gabi Barkai, who we've already mentioned as the founder of the Temple Mount Sifting Project. It was Herschel Shanks who first began to beat the drums about the potential for wet sifting to revolutionize archaeology. And two different BAR articles, which you can see listed here, he called for wet sifting the Megiddo dumps. And anyone who has ever been to Megiddo knows what these massive dump piles look like. And one can only imagine what was missed in time. Herschel's calls for wet sifting the Megiddo dumps went unheeded, and we then finally became the first excavation to ever go back and check old dump piles to see what percentage of finds were missed in comparison to what were actually found in the field. You're looking here from the top of Megiddo, looking out toward the Jezreel Valley at one of those massive dump piles. And here you're on the outside looking in at Megiddo. Again, you can see the massive dump that is here. One can only imagine the material that was missed by previous excavations. In December 2019 and January 2020, we launched this project, which I termed MEDS, the Mount Ebal Dump Salvage, although we were also taking the old dump piles from Shiloh. The goal was to wet sift 2 dump piles from the 1980s, Mount Ebal and Shiloh, in order to determine if important small finds are missed using the current method of dry sifting only prior to discarding the remaining matrix. You can see our advanced team when they arrived at our headquarters in Jerusalem at the Jerusalem Ritz. And we came with oatmeal in hand because an army runs on its tummy and this army runs on Quaker oats. And so we have taught everyone in Israel how to cook and appreciate Quaker oats. We also brought some Ritz crackers for the Ritz Hotel. And you can see our team here, at least part of it, the advanced team, getting ready to go to work with our MEDS t-shirts on. The team consisted of Melody Bogle, Mickey Klauser, Sherry Dwyer, Jacob Figueroa, Brent French, Emmeline Gerhardt, Perry Gerhardt, Greg Gulbranson, Ellen Jackson, Kevin Larson, Suzanne Latimer, Abigail Levitt, who served as assistant director, Aaron Lipkin, Mike Ludini, Jordan McClinton, Stephen Rudd, Frankie Snyder, Cindi Steele, Scott Stripling as director, and Gary Uri. You can see the graphic of the altar which Adam Zertal excavated in the 1980s on Mount Ebal, a rectangular altar which very much resembles the Second Temple period altar. Underneath that rectangular altar, he uncovered an earlier round altar, which he believed dated just one generation before the rectangular altar. It's my belief that it dates earlier than that to the time of Joshua, and that indeed the round altar is Joshua's altar. We wanted to check Adam Zertal's dump piles. Joshua 8:30 says that Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord. We wanted to have a look. And you can see here this beautiful rectangular altar as it was excavated and as it has been restored. And we have some drone footage which gives you an overview of the area. The altar sits in the middle of a footprint-shaped enclosure the size of several football fields, and to the right side of the photo is the east dump, and on the opposite side, of course, is the west dump. Archaeological excavations normally dump as close to the work site as they can so as not to expend effort carrying the material too far away. You can see the beautiful altar here, and at the perfect geometric center was the earlier round altar. The soil was relocated from Mount Ebal to Chavez-Chambron, which is a community nearby. And to our good fortune, their bad fortune, a building had burned down the previous year. And so the slab was just left there. And so we were able to then use that slab to relocate these balas full of material and to set up our dry sifting and then wet sifting operation and our processing center, and to actually stay at Chavez-Chambron in these cottages so that we would be right next to our work area, which enabled us to then work a longer day. You can see how the process begins. First, the bags are sorted so that rocks are removed. The soil is spread so that it can dry for dry sifting. Then you'll see, as evidenced by Brent French, dry sifting going on. Each gufa then is of the soil after it has dried is taken into dry sifting where the soil is removed and fines are then pulled out and saved for processing. And then the dry sifted matrix is dumped into a funnel system, which takes it down into a mesh bag. Those mesh bags are then taken over to the wet sifting station so that they can be washed. The question is, what was missed in dry sifting that would have been thrown away had we not wet sifted? You can see our portable wet sifting station for the Mount Ebal project. This was a water tank that we cut the top out of, put a pump in, got some hoses so that we can recycle the water. We have fresh water coming through a spray hose with a nozzle, and then the heavier fire type hoses for recycling the water and doing the initial wash of the material. You can see here Abigail and Cindi Steele doing the wet sifting. We also could just wash the material there and have a volunteer move it to another station to check it while someone else is washing the material. This is a very inexpensive system, but it worked very efficiently. You can see me processing the finds initially and sorting through them. This material that I'm looking at in a pre-sort has not yet been washed. Once we wash it, of course, we can see additional things. You can also see bone that's on the table and flint that's on the table, and of course duct tape. We cannot be expected to operate an excavation without duct tape. So the winter weather on certain days was quite nice, and so we were able to process the finds and get them ready for our final analysis. Shay Bar and a team of his students from Haifa University visited on a very important day when we had recovered an important find from Mount Ebal. And Shay Bar is, of course, responsible for finishing the work that Adam Zertal had done in the Manasseh region, including on Mount Ebal. And so you can see that he and his students, and of course Abigail is there with me, are intently gazing at what I'm examining. And this is our most important find from this last winter. You can see a small lead tablet, and this lead tablet, or amulet if you will, or defixione, known as a curse tablet. These are known from many places in the ancient world, and curses are written upon them, and then they're placed at a site. It is not without significance that the Bible identifies Mount Ebal as the mountain of the curse. Because it is made of lead and is difficult to open, in our laboratory we were unable to do so without causing damage to the tablet. We are now exploring X-radiography to penetrate the lead, and it looks very promising. We hope to be able to extract text from this, and it is very likely going to be a curse of some type, possibly even one of the curses mentioned at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. You can see where the tablet folds. This was thrown away, and if it was covered by dirt, although Zertal's team was very thorough, it would be almost impossible for them to note this. Tablet, it's 3.2 by 2.9 by 0.6 centimeters, covered in dirt. It just looks like another sliver of rock, but once it's washed, then a trained eye is able to pick up something of critical importance, which may help us understand Mount Ebal in a new and enlightened way. Another potentially important find is this rounded bronze blade. It's a bronze knife blade which measures 3.5 by 2.0 by 0.01 centimeters. The Talmud offers commentary on the proper procedure for slaughtering animals, and although it represents a much later source, it may follow earlier traditions. The Talmud prohibits stabbing animals, noting that when slaughtering an animal, the tip of a knife can puncture the neck, may not puncture the tip of an animal. Thus, the round-tipped knife may represent a proper sacrificial tool for Israelite animal sacrifice. Its composition of bronze suggests a late Bronze Age date, and it very well could date to the time of Joshua. You can see also an Iron Age 1 punctured handle from Mount Ebal. Adam Zertal and his team recovered many of these and published them. They missed this one. This enables us to see what pottery looked like in the Iron Age 1 period, the period of the judges, the period when the tabernacle was at Shiloh. You can see that there are many organic inclusions in this pottery, which often then either fall out or decompose over time, leaving pock marks. Moved on to Shiloh. And in Israel Finkelstein's excavation at Shiloh in the 1980s, his dump piles were easily discernible. And as we excavated these, we found many glyptic finds and a tremendous amount of pottery. It's safe to say that the Finkelstein dump pile was not nearly as clean as the Zertal dump pile. Finkelstein, from his 1980s excavation at Shiloh, published 5 scarabs. We have recovered 5 more from his dump piles. You can imagine what these could have meant if they were recovered in a stratigraphic context using wet sifting in the field as an aid to dating the various strata. Also from the Shiloh dump, we found this plaque seal with potential significance. Anything that is glyptic, of course, has great interpretive potential. We also found dozens of coins in the Finkelstein dump pile. In fact, for every one that Finkelstein noted, we found 10 in the dump pile. You're looking here at the typical coin of Alexander Jannaeus, dating to the Hasmonean period, but continuing in use up until the end of the late Second Temple period. Also from the Shiloh dump, we have this awl, a tool mentioned in the Bible, an awl, A-W-L, a beautiful example of it here. And of course, we have a tremendous amount of pottery from the Finkelstein dumps. In fact, we have more Iron 2 pottery than Iron 1 pottery, which is a fascinating observation because Finkelstein did not record an Iron 2 stratum in that area, yet we have a tremendous amount of Iron Age 2 pottery. When we came to Shiloh, we were committed to figuring out how we could wet sift in the field. And so you're looking at our wet sifting station. We poured a slab, we built a water tower, and then put in our plumbing. And of course, in the summertime, there would be shade over this. In the wintertime, we did not need it. And this enables us to actually excavate the material and track exactly where it came from. This is stratigraphic wet sifting that takes place in the field. The process is fascinating. When we excavate in a square, the material is then dry sifted. The matrix that is left over from the dry sifting is then poured down a funnel into a color-coded bag for that square and given a locus and pale number assignment. That bag is then taken to the wet sifting area where a volunteer, trained and under supervision, washes and checks it. Any archaeological material, pottery, anything glyptic, flint, anything like that is placed back in the bag with the same tag and then returned to the square supervisor so that he can record it with the material from that particular locus. This is our methodology for in-field wet sifting. And you can see the process that I have outlined here. In conclusion, these are the summary facts. Critical data can be extracted from dump piles from previous excavations. In-field wet sifting enables excavators to determine the context of small finds. Herschel Shanks was right after all. The dump piles from the past contain a tremendous amount of material and at times even have the remaining part of inscriptions that will complete those particular inscriptions. Objections to wet sifting, that it is expensive, time-consuming, or there's no water on site, do not justify the loss of invaluable data. Salvage excavations are a possible exception to this. In the future, I believe that excavation licenses should not be issued to digs who refuse to wet sift their material. We simply do not get a second bite at the apple. As an archaeologist, we only get one opportunity, and if that means slowing down, then we must slow down in order to be more thorough. Wet sifting holds the potential to revolutionize what we're finding from archaeological sites and to narrow the gap of uncertainty of what was actually there in ancient times. Finally, I would say that Zertal's dump pile at Manibala was much cleaner than Finkelstein's dump pile at Shiloh. We hope to excavate other dump piles in the future and to compile more critical information about this new methodology as it develops.